Okay, in this week's video, we are going to focus on Unit 2, Activity 2. And this activity is going to focus on 5 story elements. So you're going to learn about character, plot, setting, point of view, and theme. And most of this should probably be a review because if you've done a grade 11 English course before, or if you've done an ESLE course before, you've probably covered these 5 story elements before. So I'm hoping it's a bit of a review. It's going to be important that you understand these 5 story elements because you will have to prove that you understand them on your assignment this week, and you'll have to prove that you understand them again on your midterm test in a couple of weeks. Speaking of which, the Unit 2 Activity 2, this week's activity, is our last activity before the March break, and it's our last activity before our midterm exam. So just to explain a little bit here, I've got some important reminders, and I am going to send you an email about this later this week as well too. But our March break is from Monday, March 16th till Friday, March 20th. The course website will still be open, so you can still work on assignments and catch up, and you can still study for the midterm exam over the March break, but there will be no new material next week. So the material that we do this week is your final material, your final activity before the March break and before your midterm exam. Now, your midterm exam will be the week you come back from the March break, and it will be written in the cafeteria at St. Michael's at 12:45 Thursday, March 26th. So that'll be the week we come back after the March break. So I will release a midterm review and practice questions later this week. So if you want to study for the midterm over the March break, you can. I will also do a Google Meet like this when we come back from the March break on, what would that be? Monday, March 23rd, and I'll talk about the midterm exam and take any questions. So you have plenty of time to prepare for the midterm. But I would say anything that we've done up until this point in the course, so that's Unit 1, Activity 1 to Unit 2, Activity 2, which is this week's activity, is fair game on your midterm exam. All right, with that said, let's see if we can get into this week's activity, Unit 2, Activity 2. All right, in this activity, as I said, we're going to focus on story elements. And for my purposes, the story elements, there are 5 basics. So character, plot, setting, point of view, and theme. And so this activity is going to go through all 5. So in the Minds On, there's going to be a short little animated movie here called The Present, and it's just about, I think it's about 4 minutes long here. So I'm going to ask you to take a look at this movie, again, short film, and try to decide who is in the story, where does the story take place, what happens in the story, and what is the story's message. If you can answer those 4 very basic questions about a short little animated film here, you already understand the basics of storytelling, because who is in the story is character, where does the story take place is setting, what happens in the story is plot, and what is the story's message is theme. So this is just a basic little warm-up to show you that you already have a pretty good understanding of character, plot, setting, and theme. All right. When in the action of the lesson, or the main part of the activity here, like I said, it's going to go into more detail on our 5 story elements. And it's going to start with character. And I would expect for character, I would expect you to be able to label and explain characters in a few different ways. I would expect you to be able to tell me who is the protagonist and the antagonist in a story. I would expect you to be able to tell me whether a character is flat or round. And I would expect you to be able to tell me whether a character is static or dynamic. In many ways, these questions are opinionated. I like to ask you questions on tests or assignments where I might choose a character that, depending on your point of view, you could maybe argue that they're flat or round. So don't feel like there's an exact right answer to flat or round, or maybe even static dynamic, or maybe even protagonist antagonist. You just have to identify the character that you feel best fits these definitions and be able to explain to me. If I disagree with you, if you tell me a character is flat and I think the character is round, if you do a good job explaining why they're flat and give me evidence from a story or from a movie or whatever it is that we're looking at, then I'm willing to listen to your answer, and I'm not going to. You're not getting the marks whether you agree with me or not. You're getting the marks based on your explanation and your examples. So that's the first thing that you need to know. For character, you need to know the difference between protagonist, antagonist, flat, round, static, dynamic. And if you want a little bit more detail, here's a little video that goes over the different types of characters. Next up is plot. I would expect you to know the basic plot structure. So you have exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. I believe you would have learned this in grade 11 English or in ESL E. I'm not too big on making students go through an entire story and break down all of these different parts. But I am very interested in students being able to identify conflict in a story, because you can't have plot without conflict. You can't have a rising action, you can't have a climax without conflict. So the most important thing for me with plot is going to be down here: types of conflict. And I'm going to give you 6. I know in other classes you maybe have learned about 4 or 5 of these before, but there's 6 main conflicts for me. There's character versus self, character versus character, character versus society, character versus nature, character versus supernatural, and character versus technology. If you take a look, you can kind of see an explanation of these, and you can probably think up examples of these types of conflict in any story that you would have read or watched. You can find these types of conflict in just about any story. I mean, not every story is going to have supernatural or technology or nature, but you can find, 3 or 4 of these types of conflict in any story that you're going to read or watch this semester. If you go back and you take a look at the little video that I showed at the beginning here called The Present, you can find multiple different types of conflict in this 4-minute video. So imagine how many types of conflict you could find in a 200-page book or in a 2-hour movie, right? And so I would expect you to be able to find multiple types of conflict in any story that you read or watch this semester. We also have a little video here explaining the elements of a story, so you can take a look at that if you need a little review. And then we get into setting. And for setting, the 2, I guess, easy parts are location and time. I think every student knows when I say the word setting in grade 12 English, they immediately think, what is the story's location and what is the story's time or time period? And that's fine. You can read the definitions here and you can review that. But for me, at the grade 12 level, the most important aspect of setting is atmosphere and mood. Atmosphere is the physical environment of a scene. So is it hot? Is it cold? Is it light? Is it dark? Is it noisy? Is it quiet? And you can take the atmosphere right out of the story. The author will give it to you. Okay. And then the mood is the feelings created by the atmosphere. So if it's dark and stormy and there's thunder and lightning, then what is the feeling going to be? The mood? Well, maybe it'd be tense and frightening. If you had a scene, an atmosphere that is on a beach on a nice warm day and there's a cool breeze coming in, right? That's going to create a very different mood or feeling. Okay, so I would expect you to know what atmosphere and mood is, and I would expect you to be able to describe atmosphere and mood when you read scenes in a story. As you'll see, you'll have to do that in your assignment for me this week. Historical context is a 4th part of setting. It is kind of the teacher's job to give you the historical context. Historical context is the background knowledge that you need to better understand a story. So if you're watching a movie and it's taking place If you're watching a movie and it's taking place in 1942 in Germany, you kind of need to know what was going on in 1942 in Germany in order to fully understand the story. And that's the historical context. There is a video right here that's going to get into a little bit more detail about what is mood if you want a little more explanation. But again, it is very important that you're going through all of the notes here in Unit 2, Activity 2, and that you're understanding all of these different story components, because you're going to have to apply these ideas on your own to a story, both in the assignment this semester, this week, and on your midterm test in a couple of weeks. Okay, so that's 3 out of our 5 story elements. We also have point of view. For our purposes, there are 3 types of point of view. When a story is told, it is either told in first person, third person observant, or what can be called third person limited, and then third person omniscient, or third person unlimited. So I would expect you to be able to read a story and then tell me and explain to me why it is written in one of these 3 points of view. So it's important that you read through these explanations and that you understand the difference and that you can identify them in a story. This is a little explanation. I think this is a really good short little video. They take the balcony scene, one of the most famous scenes in literature from Romeo and Juliet, and they explain how, if Shakespeare wanted to, he could have told it from 3 different points of view. And it shows how each of these points of view work. All right, last but not least, we have theme. A theme is a message in a story. It is trying to teach you something. So what happens is when you read a story, the author wants you to think about certain things, certain messages or lessons or ideas. And so I've given you here some explanations of the different forms that themes can come in. And I've talked about how there is a difference between topic and theme. Too often students mix up a topic with a theme. So they'll tell me the theme of a story is love. Well, the theme of a story can't be love. Love is just one word. Love is a topic. The theme of the story could be a message about love. So the topic would be love. The theme would be, love, young love often ends badly, something like that, right? And so I expect you to kind of understand that a theme is a 1-sentence message, because I'm going to ask you to come up with themes for the stories that you read. I'm going to ask you to be able to be able to tell me what you think is the main theme or the most important lesson that you can learn from a story. All right, and then again, there's a little video here about how theme works in a story. All right, and that's it. That's our 5 story elements. Make sure you go through those notes carefully and fully understand each of the 5 elements. And then when you get to the end, what you're going to be challenged to do is to pick one of these 3 stories. I tried to pick 3 short stories that were very different, so that depending on your interests, you could hopefully find one of these 3 that you might like. The first one, All the Colors of Goodbye, is about a teenager who is forced to leave her country because her country is taken over by the military and her family doesn't think it's safe anymore. Some of you might be able to unfortunately relate to a story like that. The second story is about a former astronaut who is living in Florida, and he thinks that his body is being taken over by an alien presence, and he thinks that some sort of alien parasite or presence is controlling his body. So if you like kind of science fiction, kind of scary stories, then this one would be for you. And then the last one is called The Somebody, and it's a story about a Mexican-American kind of youth. They don't give his exact age, but he's a young boy, and he's living in Los Angeles. And he used to be involved with a gang, like a street gang, but the gang has disappeared and fallen apart. And now he's trying to find a purpose for his life now that he doesn't seem to know who he is anymore. So again, 3 very different stories. They all take place in different places at different time periods. You can take a look at all three. If you click on each of the stories, it will open up in a PDF file, and you can take a look. So by all means, take a look at each of them if you like, but you only have to read one. You're going to have to read one of these, and you're going to have to use what you learned from the story to complete your assignment, which we're going to get to here in a second. All right, if we click on assignment here. If we take a look, what you're going to have to do for your assignment this week is complete a short story chart. So after you have read either All the Colors of Goodbye, I Am the Doorway, or The Somebody, so the story from the content there, you're going to open up the short story chart in Google Docs, and I'll do that in a second here. And you're going to use your knowledge of the story elements covered in Unit 2, Activity 2, and details from the story you read to fill out the chart. So you're going to have to fill out this chart using information from the story that you read. So you may use direct quotes from the story as examples if you want, but aside from direct quotes from the story, you must use your own words and your own ideas. You cannot go beyond the story elements covered in this activity. So I don't want to hear about different types of conflict that maybe you read about online or maybe you learned about in another class. I want you to use the conflicts that we did in this activity. And I want you to look at flat and round in the way that we did in this activity. So when you're using the story elements and you're showing your knowledge, stick to what we've done in this activity. And please do not use sources outside of this course. Remember, I can't mark something that is not your own words and your own ideas. The chart looks like this. So there's 3 questions on the first page. So the first one is conflict. So it says identify 3 different types of conflict in the story that you read, explain how each conflict works, and then provide a detail, an example from the story to support each conflict. So you can say character versus character, character versus nature, character versus technology. You have to have 3 different types of conflict and explain how they work with examples from the story. You have to identify one location. Don't try to do the atmosphere and mood for the whole story because it changes every single time the location or time changes. But you're going to pick one location from the story, tell me what that location is, and then describe the atmosphere and describe the mood. And separate the atmosphere and mood in your answer so that I know that you know the difference. You can do your answers to these questions in point form if you want, but you need to give me detail and show me evidence from the story to back your points up. The third question is about theme. So it says summarize an important theme in one sentence. So what is the one most important thing that you think you can learn from this story that you read? Explain why the theme fits the story, and then give me evidence from the story. If we go down to the second page, you have character questions. So flat and round, identify one character in the story. So pick one character and explain to me why that character is flat or round. Okay. And then provide evidence. So if you're going to tell me the character is flat, show me that the character is always behaving in the same way. Give me 2 examples from the story that show that they're always behaving the same. If you're going to tell me that a character is round, give me 2 examples in the story showing me that the character behaves in an opposite way. Maybe the character is really friendly in one scene, and maybe the character is really mean and rude in another scene. So you're showing me opposite sides of their personality. The next question is about static and dynamic. Static means that a character does not learn anything important in the story. Dynamic means that a character does learn something important. And so again, pick another character, not the same character that you did for flat and round, but pick a different character from the story and explain to me why that character is static or dynamic. Explain to me why they learned or did not learn during the story, and then give me evidence from the story. And then last but not least is point of view. Which point of view is used in your story? Is it first person? Is it third person observant? Is it third person omniscient? So tell me which point of view, explain how you know, and then give me a quote from the story to prove it. Okay. And that's your whole assignment right here. Once you've completed the chart, submit it to the Dropbox. So again, this is an explanation of the chart right here, but what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to click on the short story chart here. And then it will ask you to make a copy. And so you'll make your own copy. You'll hit make a copy. And then you'll have your own copy right here that you can fill in. So again, you're going to answer the exact same questions that I just talked about. You're going to answer these 6 questions, fill out the chart, and then submit this chart to me. Again, you're choosing either all the colors of goodbye, I am the doorway, or the somebody, whichever one of those 3 stories you prefer. Okay. And that's it for this week. This is the assignment that we're doing this week. You're going to have to do something similar to this on your midterm exam in a few weeks. So again, it's very important that you understand character, plot, setting, point of view, and theme. If you have any trouble, let me know. Send me an email, and I can certainly try to further explain any of the story elements. I guess that's it for this week. Good luck with the assignment this week. And if I don't talk to you before, have a good March break.